happening, guys? James Scoop Writer here for a bit of a story, okay? So, when I recorded the review for this car, I totally forgot to mention, the story of this car. How it came to be, where I found it, where I bought it. My God, it's dark through here. Can't see me at all. So, I'm gonna rewind a couple years to when I was first looking for a car. I actually was open to a lot of different ideas. My only criteria was it had to be diesel. It had to be a diesel. I didn't care if it was a pickup truck. I didn't care if it was a little tiny, Volkswagen Jetta. I didn't care what it was. So, I'm hitting up the local Craigslist, and I'm hitting up, whatever car magazines I can find, just reading and finding cars for sale. Well, basically what had happened, my parents knew what I was wanting, and they knew I wanted a diesel of some type. So my dad is actually a jeweler, and he works for a guy who collects these cars. And his daughter was driving one at the time, and she had just finished high school, and she actually drove the car all the way through high school, basically. So she was driving it. She didn't take the best care of it. It was real rusty. But my parents were like, hey, we think we found you a car. So, okay. What is it? And they proceeded to tell me that it's a Mercedes. Now, at first, they didn't share with me the year. They just said, yeah, it's a Mercedes diesel. And I was like, hell yeah, that sounds sweet. Well, we're talking a little bit more about it and this and that, and they tell me where the car is and who has it. So I'm like, okay, now what year is this thing? Does it have a turbo? What are we talking? And my mom's like, yeah, it's a 1980 300D. So I'm like, okay, that's a little bit older than I was expecting, but we can make it work. So we go and we look at the car, and it starts up. Now, the car needed new fuel lines because when you would start it, the return line had a big rust hole in it, so it would just spray fuel everywhere. But I fell in love with that car. I loved that thing. It was so weird and cool. I had to have it. So we bought it for $500. Yes. And I drove that car for 2 years until the rust got worse. I drove it through a winter, and I had some starting issues with it. When it got real cold, that thing would not start at all. So my parents were like, you need to get rid of that thing because you're going to die if you get in a wreck. That's fair. Plus, that car had some engine issues. It was super slow. I think this car is slow. Oh, it's laughable because that car was so much slower than this one. It didn't have a turbo. It was the same engine as this. It didn't have a turbo. We're talking 85 horsepower. 85 horsepower. And that thing it was so bad. Anyways, so I ended up selling that car, and then I bought my second car, which was a 1984. Now, my 1984 was a good car. I think I paid a little bit too much for it, for what it was. It was a 1984 silver 300D, same body style as the 1980. They ran that body style from 77 until 85. Anyways, it was the same W123 300D, and it had the turbo diesel engine that I was lusting after. I was like, I have to have a turbo diesel, and it had it. So I went and looked at it. I drove about an hour to go look at it. So I went and looked at it, and it had a little bit of rust. Wasn't bad. The paint was complete junk. The car looked awful. But one thing about it that really struck a chord with me was the fact of how well it ran. That car had 218,000 miles on it when I bought it, and it ran so well. At that point, I didn't care how bad the body looked. I test drove the thing. It shifted really, really hard, but the engine ran great. So I was like, okay, we can do this. So I buy the car, I drive it for about 9 months. Until the day after Christmas 2015, I hit a deer with it. And I was crushed. I was so upset that I hit that deer with that car. Because it meant a few things. It meant that I couldn't drive my 300D that I loved very much. And it meant that I had to drive my dad's 1997 Cadillac DeVille. which I didn't like at all because it got terrible gas mileage. It's not stylish, it's not cool, it's not weird, it just sucked. So, it was back to Craigslist. And, I'm scouring the ads around here. And next thing you know, I run across this lovely white 1983 300D. And wow, I was starstruck a little bit. I was like, wow, this thing is so pretty. I had a lot of questions about it. So I immediately shot the previous owner of this car an email, asking him about it and stuff. And now the ad mentioned that this car had a bit of a knock in the engine, a bit of a tapping sound. So I had to ask about that. That was actually one of the reasons that he was selling this car. I emailed the guy and I was like, hey, what's going on with the thing? What's up with the engine? Do you know what's wrong with it? And he said, no, it might be fuel injectors, it might be this, it might be that. We skated around this and that and decided that I was gonna come look at it. That I was gonna come look at the car and check it out. So we hopped in the car and drove down there. Now, mind you, the time that I got this car was in the middle of January, and in Ohio, it's cold as hell in January. I mean, anywhere it's cold. But I think the day we went to go look at this thing, it was in the teens. It was like 15 degrees. So we piled in the car, it was just a terrible day. It was spitting snow, and we drove over an hour to go look at this thing. So, my dad, we all got in the car together, in the Cadillac, ironically, and went and looked at it. And, I was like, wow, it needs an engine. He started it up, it sounded really bad. It ran and drove, and the guy had just had the transmission replaced. But the engine did not sound good. So, do I buy it? Do I not buy it? I bought it. I was like, you know what? I want a nice 300D. I want a nice 300D that I can show off, that I can restore to its factory beauty, and just drive as a regular old car. So, and that's exactly what I did. I ended up buying that car, and I pulled the engine out of both cars, and I swapped the two, leaving the new transmission in this one. But the engine that I pulled out of the silver car, I put new gaskets in, I refreshed all of the aluminum, I polished it up, cleaned it up. The thing looked awesome. So I get it all buttoned back up, I put a new alternator on it, new water pump, new this, new that. It's ready to go at this point. It is ready for another few 100,000 miles. So I get it all buttoned back up and stick it back in the car, fire it up, it runs great, started first try. Now, that was awesome, I didn't even have to crank, and the engine had been out of the car for like 3 months, I think. I had the engine out of the silver car and was putting gaskets on it. That time period was about 3 months. So it was amazing that this thing started right up without hesitation. That was awesome. That was super, super cool. So, again, to me, it was like one of those things. I was like, yep, this is why I have one of these. They're just so reliable and so great. So anyways, I get the engine put back in. I'm all happy. It fires up. I'm driving it around the block. Well, it's sitting in the alley behind my house, and I look underneath the car, and drip, 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 motor oil. It's motor oil. The thing is pissing out motor oil. So I pull it back in the garage. I'm a little upset, but I was expecting other things to leak, so I was pretty happy. So what it turned out being was the turbo oil drain tube. Now in these cars, it's a two-section piece. There's the bottom half that connects to the oil pan, and the top half that comes out of the turbo. Easy enough. Well, there's an O-ring that goes between the two, and what had happened when I put it back together, the O-ring had rolled out of its little groove, and that was the only thing wrong. So I took it back apart, I reset the O-ring in its little seat, and I buttoned it all back up, and it was perfect. And I have done nothing to it since. And that was just under 5,000 miles ago, which I think is awesome. I haven't done a thing to this car since then. Engine-wise, I've done all kinds of stuff like brakes, did all the brakes, I did front suspension, control arms, tie rods, ball joints, I think I even did the bushings. Yeah, the lower control arm bushings. It got everything. There are a couple things I need to do yet, like drive shaft flex discs. But other than that, this thing's awesome. It's freaking great. So anyways, that is the history of this car that I neglected for some stupid reason to share in the review. So yeah, that's it. You know, I bought the car, did an engine swap, and it's been awesome ever since. Thank you guys for sticking around and watching. I hope you have an awesome day and stay cool.